Hello everyone, hope you all had a great Thanksgiving if you celebrate that. I'm still back home in Delaware with my family to celebrate the holidays, but I'll be back in LA soon. But until then, I'd like to talk about the Game Awards. It is fast approaching. I believe it is going to be streamed on December 12th. The nominees are in, and as expected, people are arguing over who deserves to be nominated, who doesn't, which games deserve to win and which doesn't, so on and so forth. So if you go to Google right now and type in Game Awards 2019 vote, you get this screen that shows all of the nominees, and the big one is, of course, Game of the Year, and this is what the list looks like. You've got Control, Death Stranding, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Resident Evil 2, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and The Outer Worlds. Now, one game that's facing a lot of contention in terms of its nominations is Death Stranding, specifically because people feel as though the relationship between Jeff Keighley and Hideo Kojima might have had something to do with that nomination. That's the sentiment amongst some out there. There's also the fact that Death Stranding got nominated for 8 awards, which is, I think, more than any other game. So there's Game of the Year, Best Narrative, Best Performance, Best Score and Soundtrack, Best Action Adventure, Best Audio Design, Best Art Direction, and Best Studio/Game Direction. So there's some people out there saying, what's up with that? Did Jeff Keighley's friendship with Kojima have something to do with that? And this is something that I want to discuss and also maybe clarify, because I think some people have the wrong idea in terms of how the process of the Game Awards works. So first of all, with Death Stranding, one of the things to note is that Jeff Keighley is in the game, and some people feel as though there might be some impropriety there where Jeff Keighley's in the game, so that somehow indicates that Death Stranding was automatically nominated because the host is in the game. That's kind of the idea that's floating around right now. And then Jeff Keighley did express solidarity and support towards Kojima back in 2015 when Hideo Kojima wasn't allowed to attend the Game Awards because of the whole situation with Konami.
Mr. Kojima had every intention of being with us tonight, but unfortunately he was informed by a lawyer representing Konami just recently that he would not be allowed to travel to tonight's awards ceremony to accept any awards.
So this, combined with Jeff Keighley being in the game and then Death Stranding being nominated, and with Death Stranding being such a divisive game, people are wondering, should Death Stranding be even up here? And even if it deserves to be up here, was this done for the right reasons? And I think one mistake or misconception that's out there is that Jeff Keighley influences every aspect of the Game Awards, and especially with nominations, which is not really the case. So Jeff Keighley is the host of the Game Awards, and he produces it, so he organizes, which trailers are going to make it in, and, the sequence of events of the event and stuff like that. But as far as nominations go, as far as the Game of the Year awards go, that's actually decided by a host of other people, and the jury is actually listed in the website here, and you can see it's basically a bunch of news outlets that are out there across the world. You've got everything from Argentina, Australia, Brazil, China, Chile, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Middle East, Peru, Poland, Russia, South Africa, South Korea, Spain, Turkey, the UK, and of course the United States. And if you look at the list of outlets here, you'll see that we have outlets that gave Death Stranding a good score and outlets that gave Death Stranding a not-so-good score. So they're all really here. IGN gave it a 6.8 or something, but they're still part of the jury that decides which game deserves Game of the Year. And they probably said, we don't think Death Stranding should be Game of the Year. But other outlets might have said, we disagree. I think Death Stranding was a special experience that we think deserves to be Game of the Year nominated at the very least, or win the Game of the Year awards. So that's how this system is supposedly meant to work. Now, additional details about how the Game Awards process works is highlighted in this page. This is an FAQ segment of the Game Awards website. And if you scroll down here, there are a number of questions and excerpts that further detail what's going on with this Game Awards system. So First up, we have how are nominees selected for the Game Awards? And this reads, nominees for most categories of the Game Awards are chosen by an international jury of over 80 global media and influencer outlets, selected for their history of critical evaluation of video games. The full list of outlets is available here. Each voting outlet completes a confidential, unranked ballot based on the collective and diverse opinion of its entire editorial staff, listing out its top 5 choices in each category. Ballots are tabulated, and the 5 games that appear on the most ballots are put forth as nominees. In the event of a tie, 6 or more nominees will be announced in a category. Game Awards producer Jeff Keighley is not a member of the jury and does not vote on the nominees. Next up, why do you use this jury to select the nominees? This reads, given the sheer number of games released each year, as well as the extended time required to fully evaluate products, a voting outlet approach allows for the widest possible critical assessment. A ballot submitted to the Game Awards represents the collective opinion of an entire outlet, not one individual's point of view. And then beyond that, you've got these dozens of outlets around the world doing that same process and submitting their ballots, so that keeps things varied. And yeah, if that process is indeed how it's stipulated here, then I think it's one that isn't really unfair in my opinion. Next up, who selects the winners? Winners are determined by a blended vote between the voting jury, 90%, and public fan voting, 10%. Fans can vote for their favorite games once every 24 hours on thegameawards.com and via Google search voting across all categories, and also via Twitter DM and Discord in select categories. 90% voting jury, and fan voting is 10%, and basically fans can tip that scale if 2 games are neck on neck in terms of how the voting jury votes with their ballots. Next up, we have this question, which reads, why don't fans completely choose the winners? And the response to that is, creating a 100% fan vote presents several challenges. First, given that some games are exclusive to one platform, a public vote puts single-platform games at an inherent disadvantage over multi-platform titles. That's a fair point. In addition, it is important that winners cannot be socially engineered in any way. We find that a blended vote is the most credible and authentic way to select winners. I think that's actually a fair assessment. I feel like oftentimes a public voting tends to involve which community is stronger rather than which game has the most merits. There is a part of that there, so to have a blended vote, I think makes sense. Then we have a question asking if there are any fees to submit a game to be nominated. The response is that there's no fees involved. Any game that gets released is essentially up for nomination, and then the voting jury decides. Next up, this question asks if voting outlets are given free or advanced copies of games for consideration. This is something that publishers and developers are allowed to do if an outlet needs access to a game, but it says here, in order to ensure the credibility of the voting process, the Game Awards maintains a strict no campaigning policy. Publishers and developers are asked to avoid any communication that could be interpreted as campaigning for a nomination. Any violations of this policy are reviewed and may lead to the disqualification of a title, or in extreme cases, disqualification of an entire publisher slate from awards eligibility in any given year. So basically, the standard process of review copies is allowed, and given how many companies give out free copies to outlets, especially early copies for review purposes, I don't get the sense that a free copy of a game is going to influence disposition all that much, especially when all of these games that have given out free copies to outlets for review purposes are competing against each other. So there's that. Next up, we have this question. What is the cutoff date for games to be eligible this year? This reads, games eligible for the Game Awards this year must be available for public consumption on or before November 15th, 2019. Titles that are released after this date will be eligible for the Game Awards ceremony in 2020. So the reason this is important is because Jedi Fallen Order, which is a Star Wars game published by EA that's actually good, miraculously, well, it hasn't been nominated for anything this year, which likely indicates that it didn't meet the deadline, except it says right here, the deadline is November 15th, 2019, and Jedi Fallen Order released exactly on that date. So it's just strange that Jedi Fallen Order didn't get any kind of nomination, and that it's likely being saved for next year's awards, even though it released on or before November 15th. Now, here's another FAQ worth highlighting. Do show sponsors or advisory board members have an increased chance of winning or being nominated for an award? The response reads, no, there is no connection. The voting on nominees and winners is handled by a jury that is wholly unaware of who's sponsoring or participating in other elements of the program. The reason this is brought up is because if you go to the About section of the Game Awards, you'll see that the advisory board is comprised of a lot of higher-ups at these various game studios or companies. So you've got members of Activision, AMD, EA, Google, Kojima Productions, Microsoft, Nintendo, Tencent, Rockstar Games, Sony, Ubisoft, Valve, and Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment. And Death Stranding is sort of the bigger subject. There are some people talking about how Hideo Kojima is on the board, and does that not cause a conflict of interest? But the FAQ here stipulates that it really is up to the voting jury, these news outlets from around the world, to do all the nominating and deciding on the Game Awards winners. And as for what the advisory board's role is, it reads right here, the advisory board helps guide and advance the mission of the Game Awards. The board is not involved in the selection of award nominees or winners and learns of the results of voting at the same time as the general public. And then to further avoid any kind of shady dealings behind the scenes, according to the Game Awards FAQ, the game developers and publishers are not made aware of nominees or winners in advance of the public. They find out the nominees and winners at the same time as the public. The Game Awards does not disclose winners in advance of the live ceremony. There are no exceptions to this rule. So there is that. I think what's causing some people concerned about the legitimacy of Death Stranding's nomination is how divisive it is, and Jeff Keighley's appearance in the game. And then there's also the fact that one of the heads of Famitsu is also featured in the game, and Famitsu awarded Death Stranding basically a perfect score. As far as Famitsu goes, they've been awarding perfect scores willy-nilly. I think Final Fantasy XIII back in the day got a perfect score, which I highly disagree with, but, that's their opinion. So, I don't know. For me, that's not really hard evidence of impropriety because Famitsu's so lax when it comes to giving out 10s. And as far as Jeff Keighley goes, the Game Awards is Jeff Keighley's baby, and for him to risk its legitimacy just to make it to a Kojima game, like the risk involved in doing something like that versus what the award is, which is just having your likeness be in one game, it's so off kilter that I don't get the sense this is really a situation that's happening, the suggested notion of impropriety. And yes, Kojima and Jeff are really good friends, but for what's being suggested in terms of impropriety, in terms of that suggestion to be true, it would have to be a conspiracy on a massive level where every outlet is involved, where no outlet is reporting on this because they're in on it somehow. Like, it feels insane to go to that length just to win the Game Awards. So for my part, I don't think there is impropriety here. Like, I don't think the relationship between Jeff and Kojima had anything to do with Death Stranding being nominated. It's just the voting jury came together from across the world and decided that Death Stranding and these games are the ones that deserve to be up here. And I think that's pretty much it. And I totally get if you don't agree with Death Stranding being nominated or any of these other games being nominated. I totally get if you have a different opinion in terms of which games deserve to be nominated. But the conspiracies of impropriety and shady behind-the-scenes dealings, I haven't seen enough evidence for me to support that in any way. And the process of the way the nominations happen seem to be confirmed by a number of outlets. Nobody seems to be reporting on any behind-the-scenes dealings. And with a voting jury this big, if something shady was going on behind the scenes, I would think we'd hear of it by now. Somebody behind the scenes would say something, especially outlets that have reported on a lot of shady behind-the-scenes dealings, but that's just not currently happening. As for the nominations themselves, I honestly don't really care that much who wins. I know what games I like, and that's good enough for me. I'd be pretty happy if Death Stranding won, because I really love playing that game, even if some people have a hard time believing that. I don't care. I know what I love. I know I loved playing Death Stranding. I know plenty of other people did as well, but if that's not your opinion, that's fine too. And if any of these other games win, I'm happy for them too. Like, if Resident Evil 2 wins, I'd be happy for that. Smash Bros. Ultimate, I love that game. If that wins, I'm fine with that. Frankly, it's just, this is not that important to me. Like, it's good to, like, cheer some of these people on, and there's a bit of that, like, sportsmanship kind of element to it in there, but I'm aware of what I like, and you guys are probably aware of the games that you like. You probably have your own games of the years, and just enjoy the games that you like, and this is just, I mean, it is what it is. It's not, like, the be-all, end-all of what determines a good versus a bad video game, or what video game is better than the other. It's all ultimately just subjective. Now, I know there are some people saying that there are a couple games missing here that they would have liked to see, and I agree with some of those sentiments. I do think Devil May Cry 5 should be up here, for example. I know a lot of people have talked about Fire Emblem Three Houses, and then there's Astral Chain as something that a lot of people have mentioned is an amazing game that deserves to be up here. So there's some disagreements there, but ultimately, no matter who gets nominated or who wins or who loses, there's always somebody that's going to be happy, there's always somebody that's going to be upset. And I just don't care that much about some award ceremony. But yeah, we'll see who wins Game of the Year. I think Death Stranding has a decent chance, but if we have this voting jury where a lot of them are so divided, you know, it's certainly possible that it's not going to win, actually. We might see it go to, like, Sekiro, or Resident Evil 2, I think, has a very good chance, given that game was pretty much universally heralded across the board. Resident Evil 2, I think, might be able to take it, but if Death Stranding does, that'd be cool too. If Sekiro takes it, that'd be cool too. I don't know, these are all great games. It is what it is. Anyway, there you have it, folks. These are one man's take on this whole rumor that Jeff Keighley's friendship with Kojima might be affecting Death Stranding's nomination on the Game Awards, the Game of the Year awards. I don't buy it based on the evidence and information that's out there. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on all of this. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.